Cool.
of what to expect once we're recording. Okay, so we should be live. YouTube usually takes a few seconds to actually connect up, but
This is fancy.
let me give you guys a quick rundown. Yeah, scientist.
Like it.
And it does all the synchronization and stuff, so my
That's
job
sick.
got way
Yeah.
easier.
Nice.
That's cool.
Yeah. So the show is roughly 45 minutes to an hour. We break it up into 3 segments. So those are roughly 15, 20 minutes. And I'll worry about all that timing. I'm your MC for today. So Divya's co-pilot, not GitHub co-pilot. She's the all natural.
I'm
That
an
was
AI.
last episode.
Yeah, actually I said that last episode, didn't I? Dang it, I'm reusing the old material already. That's a major weakness of mine.
It's only
Flying
old
blind.
if you, yeah, it's only old if you listen to the last episode. So otherwise, it's
That's
new.
true. Well, I appreciate that you picked up on that one because that means you listened. What was I saying? Co-pilot, yeah. So I'll be hosting with 2 guests. Feel free to just talk amongst yourselves in terms of like, you don't have to be real coordinated. Like Alex, be like, "Hey Sam, why don't you answer that one?" Totally fine.
Cool.
Just like
yeah, we'll do a few handoffs.
Sweet. So, just like the 4 of us are sitting out in the coffee or salmon or something like that. The breaks are just ad reads, so they're just edit stops. We don't actually have to take a break, but it is a good chance to
Okay.
go to the bathroom, get a drink, and sometimes we'll back channel and talk about what happens next. We have a file outline, but we like it to keep it conversational. So feel free to tell stories, take tangents, ask us questions. Just kind of let it go where it's going to go. And Alex, I'm going to revert what I said before. Maybe if you can mute while you're not talking, that might help, just because it's a little distracting, the background.
No issues.
Cool. It won't matter for post-production, but for the live show, it'll matter for live folks. Hi, live listeners on YouTube. We're just getting ready here to get started. The rough outline is like segment 1's intro, tell us about Polaris, tell us about yourself, and then this just kind of starts meta, like the idea of researching in public and learning in public. And then segment 2 is like getting into the Sass, the history of Sass at Shopify, why replace it, what criteria, etc. And then segment 3 is like the deep dive into the alternatives. But like I said, we can kind of just let it weave and go where it wants. And if some segments are longer or shorter, all good.
That's great.
Anything in particular you want to make sure we cover? I know you have this thing looming, which is the design system. Is not announced or out yet, but you want to tee that up, or does it tie into this conversation at all, maybe in the background?
I think so. Like, I think it's more like a bit of a meta conversation around design systems at Shopify and where we're going.
Yeah.
Which I think we can kind of weave into that intro piece.
Yeah.
But I think that it's probably not the best timing to get into the meat and potatoes of like all of the details about what we're trying to do. But I think we can give like a high level overview of like what we're doing and why it's important.
Sweet. Okay. I'm going to put out a message to our Slack. By the way, if you're on YouTube watching live and you want to chat, we disable on YouTube to centralize. We don't like decentralized chat around here. So all of our chat happens in the JS Party channel of Changelog's community Slack, which you can join, of course, for free at jsparty.fm/community. Hop in JS Party channel. That's where the chatter happens. And tweets going out, and then we'll start the theme song, and we'll get going.
Yeah.
You bet. This should be fun. All right, Divya, you good? Sam, you good?
Good.
Okay. Let's get that theme song going then. JS Party.
JavaScript should be destroyed.
Maybe not. One button. Push.
JavaScript should be destroyed.
Oh, that's the wrong button. I'm sorry.
Web lovers.
I'm sorry. That's also the wrong button.
Too many buttons.
Aha! I found ya, you stinking bug! I'm sorry. That wasn't the right button at all. Sorry, I'm trying to get cheap laughs to break the ice. Okay, let's go for real. Oh yes, the sound of those Breakmaster cylinder beats means it is time once again for JS Party. I'm Jared, your internet friend, and I'm joined by my internet friend. It's Divya. What's up, Divya?
Going
It's going quite well. How are you?
pretty good. Good to be back.
Great to have you back. We have a couple of special guests today from Shopify. We have an excellent conversation around open research, alternatives to Sass, CSS, all sorts of goodies. We have Alex and Sam. Guys, welcome to JS Party.
Thank you so much for having us. It's really great to be here. Really excited to dive into those topics as well. I feel like, it's not just about us. I feel like this can benefit lots of companies and communities and things. So, yeah, excited to be here. Thanks.
Yeah, second that. Thanks.
You bet. Well, let's start off by getting to know you two a little bit and your roles at Shopify. Now, I know you work on the Polaris team and there's a design system involved, and I'll give a little bit of the backstory on how I found this and what I think is cool about it. Not just replacing Sass. We're not here to diss on that, but just the open research and the fact that tooling changes, need changes, and we can all kind of learn these things together and take findings from different people's experiences. But let's start with you, Sam. What's your role at Shopify, and how involved are you in this Sass replacement project?
Yeah, hi. So I'm Sam. I'm a senior front-end developer at Shopify, working on the Polaris team. We've just kicked off this research, looking to kind of find the next evolution for Polaris, and just kind of thinking this would be an opportunity to see what else is out there. We've kind of seen these challenges with Sass, but this was a good pivot point for us to kind of take a step back and look at these other alternatives.
Very good. Alex, tell us about Polaris, what it is inside of Shopify.
So, yeah, thanks. My name's Alex. I'm a front-end engineering manager at Shopify. I spend most of my time working on the Polaris design system. Polaris is sort of the way that we describe it right now is our sort of like North Star. It's like where we head to, what we want to focus on for design quality across our different experiences. It's very focused on our admin product. So the admin product for Shopify is if you're creating a store, you obviously will get orders that come in and you'll see them in a big list, or you'll be managing products that you also see in a big list. When you click on a product, you see a form. All of these little parts of the UI are sort of reusable pieces that we put into our design system, Polaris. So when a team creates a text input or a text field or a card or a navigation, we have all of these little pieces that we've constructed with strong opinions on design and that we've sort of centralized in one place. We'll talk a little bit about the evolution of this because I think that sort of focus on this one admin product has also caused us certain pain. But we can get into that in a bit. But yeah, very excited to like talk design systems and our research today.
Yeah, well, what I think is cool about this, not the research itself, although that's cool as well, but what really interests me is that I had access to this research and these findings. And that's because you've done it all in the open on your GitHub, not issues, although I always call it GitHub issues now, GitHub discussions on the Polaris repo inside of the Shopify org. And so this was something that floated around and people shared it and came across my radar somehow. And I got to read and come along for the ride and see what you guys did and decided on and all of that stuff. So I just think this is a really cool trend, and I'm wondering whose idea this was. Is this how you all always work? You just, hey, put your stuff out there and just kind of learn in public.
Maybe I'll start, but I'll have to hand over to Sam for a few things. Like, our team is really focused, and I think before I even joined Shopify, was really focused on building an open source community. So if you look at the Polaris React repo today and Shopify's Polaris website, polaris.shopify.com, we've all open source as a platform. We get so many benefits from that, where we have third-party developers who are building applications or products for the Shopify ecosystem that can use the tools that we're building and learn from them. But sort of where we're at today is we're thinking of like, how do we make these tools better for the teams internally at Shopify and better for the teams externally? And as we go through this process, we want to work in the open, and we want to work in the open for many different reasons. Like the things that come to my mind are strong, strong visions for what we have, but then we want to hear other people's opinions. Like we currently have some opinions now on what we think we want to replace Sass with, but we don't just want to replace Sass and like have an internal conversation with just our team. We'd love to know other people's points or perspectives, and opening up these conversations have really helped us start some of these, I'd say, learning opportunities with other teams. More recently, we've had a chat with the Spotify design system team around this, and sort of learning their ins and outs of how they're thinking about design systems and how they're thinking about scaling these things, and just being able to like put that research in a public place and share that with them. I think is a great way for us to just say like it's there. Like we don't have to have a shared Google document with just their team. We can share it with them, and maybe they'll have a meeting with another team like the Atlassian design system team, and they can say, hey, did you see what Shopify is working on? And it's not like we have to constantly update links or anything like that. It's just all in an open place. But Sam, I know there's some other things we were thinking about when we made that open source. Did you want to talk about those as well?
Sure. Yeah, I think, again, coming back to just working on the open was kind of a strong focus we wanted to have for this next part of Polaris. We say like in Shopify, defaults, we want to be very transparent internally. And so if we knew that we wanted to be transparent or have this available ultimately public, why not start earlier? Still having that, a big release is nice. We will have a good solid release of whatever we do come up with, but getting that feedback early on, I think is really high value, super informative to get not only internal Shopify perspectives, and we only know what we know on the team internally, but hearing from experience and the expertise of others outside of Shopify is just tremendously valuable. Yeah.
Some of the things that have already happened from this like open source research in a way, like we've had connections with the vanilla extract team. Like we've had a meeting with them recently, and I don't know if that would have happened if our research wasn't public. We've also sort of like on the vanilla extract product and said this is something Shopify is investing in exploring. And in putting that spotlight on that product, we hope other people also get excited about it and want to use or experiment or learn about it, and maybe they'll share learnings back with us. The other really awesome thing that I just didn't realize would happen is we had so many people just jump into those research documents and be like, this is wrong. And I love being wrong because it just helps us learn. And it helps us learn that maybe our understanding of this thing was incorrect, or our understanding of this tool could have been wrong. And with this plugin or with this thing in the ecosystem, we could have made a much better adjustment or solution. So it's also just great to open source it, see other people's opinions, learn from other people. We know what we know, and I think opening that up to the open source community helps us learn the gaps that we don't know as well. So that's been a really great experience, sort of just exposing our research and being vulnerable as well. I think that's the easiest way to describe it, is this is our understanding, we're going to chuck it out there, and if people disagree with it, that's great, because we'll learn from that and we'll make a better product from that for our users and for our teams at Shopify as well.
That's awesome. So how do you balance, I think it's really cool that you're including a lot of people in the process and decision making, because it sort of allows you to widen and broaden your own search and your own collection of knowledge. But where do you draw the line with regards to because there's always this phenomenon, just like too many cooks in the kitchen making decisions. So where's that balance that your team makes with regards to filtering feedback and then making decisions yourself?
So, but like, I think that like at the end of the day, our team needs to make a decision and try something. So we'll appreciate all the feedback that we'll hear. Like we heard some great feedback about like Tailwind. We heard some great feedback about emotion. It doesn't mean that we're just going to stop doing what we're doing and go and use those other libraries. We still have to have an opinion and try something and give it a go. But it's really great because we're sort of in a really safe environment right now that if we were to fail with the technology, it's not the end of the day, and we're still early day prototyping and learning. So it's great to like hear those insights because maybe we'll go back to those tools and go, maybe this would be useful with this plugin or with this other approach to using it that we didn't think about previously. Like being more honest as well, like Polaris React, our other open source repository, like we have so many issues and so many features that people are like constantly asking us to do or constantly asking us to fix. And we don't really have an open roadmap right now or an open way that we're sort of approaching fixing those. And we've been putting a lot of encouragement back into the people in that community to like create pull requests, and we'll review them and work with you to like ship these features. But for much bigger things in that ecosystem, it's really hard to change because there are so many layers internally as a company that we've sort of built into these opinions that we've shared that it becomes really difficult to say, if you wanted this in a navigation, we actually have a really strong opinion that that shouldn't be in a navigation. And well, in our internal products, we can see how that would be valuable in the application that you're building, but that becomes a really interesting tension. And I don't think we have a great answer for that right now, to just be honest. Like, I think we're still figuring that out. Like, how do we build the best product for our teams internally as a company so that we can keep scaling and solving the problems that we need to solve, but also like empower the teams externally to build the best applications that they can solve, because we would love this system to help not just our teams, but their teams as well. Yeah, I don't know, is there anything you want to add, Sam?
Sure. I do think it's interesting. You mentioned like too many cooks in the kitchen and just receiving all this feedback, and how are we able to kind of, take the bits and pieces that maybe are applicable and then others that might not be. Some of the feedback I even saw in some of the early discussions on the alternatives to Sass, it just kind of made me think about like not everyone has the same context, our team does. And we're not able to communicate all of our needs in great detail. So it really does provide, though, a different perspective of what someone else might have from a different lens and giving a different context or a different situation. Yeah, so there were just like some comments, and it's interesting to see one person mention something, and then because there is this community involvement, you're not the one who's on the hook to respond, or it's, you just kind of wait on it and just sit on it, let the feedback simmer, and it's just good information to have. And you actually just kind of see the conversation evolve, and people continue to contribute and add new perspectives. So.
I guess I never considered that if it's out in the open as a community sort of initiative that is led by Shopify, you could let the community continue a conversation without necessarily being the arbiter of decision making in there. You're like, we're making this decision and it's open to like interpretation, and then you kind of let people duke it out, and then you filter the feedback. That's actually really interesting.
Form of research, like we know what we've learned, and now we've just like opened up for that platform to say like, do you agree, do you disagree, do you want to have a 50 comment thread discussion around, I don't know, Tailwind's theming abilities? If you do, and we'll read that anyway because we're interested in that and we want to learn more. But we don't have to invest ourselves, 100% into those discussions. What we want to invest ourselves into is, are we making the right decisions for our company and for our external users? And that allows us to like stay a little bit more focused, I would say.
I would just add, like, as we kicked off that discussion, we can continue to make progress and experiment and do our own investigations. And just the feedback that comes in later on is kind of like just additional information that kind of helps inform our progress moving forward. So if we do reach either other roadblocks or see other opportunities, that conversation that continues to evolve just kind of helps inform that.
So a lot of these discussions tend to be led from your side of things, like, we're thinking about replacing Sass, but is there also an opportunity for like the external users, or I guess I'll talk about external users because internally it's actually easy to raise feedback, but externally, is there like an RFC kind of a process where users are like, hey, we're using this particular tool, Polaris, and we want this being added? Is there that process, or how exactly do they go about doing that?
We definitely, I would say, it's a lot lighter on the process side right now. Like we don't really see Polaris being as complex as something like React, where it's like this needs to always be backwards compatible and it has this gigantic community behind it. So it's a lot more lighter. I would say that our current process is open an issue or a pull request and we'll have a conversation with you. We have recently started having discussions, and if anyone wanted to start a discussion around an approach that we were taking, we'd love to like talk with them. But I think that's honestly something that we've got a lot of room to like learn and adapt in as well. Is like, how do we engage these like external teams or agencies that are building things with Polaris, understand their problems and system. Like we've heard great feedback from people that they don't want to use React, and Polaris is a very React-based design system right now. Either it's that they struggle with like setting up like create React app, or they don't know how to deploy these things, or maybe they're just more comfortable with different technologies. We would love the system to be more agnostic to be able to address those needs, but that also requires a lot of work and investment. So we're also trying to figure out like what are the best ways to support them without, I think, also like slowing down our progress. Because a really good example of this is if someone came and told us, we want you to support Figma, Sketch, Framer, React, Android, so like, I don't know what Androids are in with these days, iOS, like all of these different technologies. Say then we added a new component, or we added a new property that changed the size of something, we'd have to do that in each of those technologies. So those changes become, I guess they scale at like an exponential rate every like thing that we have to support. So we do have to be a little bit opinionated and try and guide the community, but we also really want to support them. So yeah, back to your question, we don't really have a great process right now, but I think that's something we'd love to explore.
The thing I love about this open research is that you touched on it, Alex, when you mentioned that the vanilla extract team has been in touch. You all very well laid out like these are the alternatives that we are analyzing, and it allows the people who are involved in those communities, whether they're the maintainers, the creator themselves, or a happy user or a not so happy user, to hop in and weigh in. And I just thought it was so cool that, like, for instance, the Mighty Penguin, which is a great handle, by the way, who is the author of Dessert Box, which y'all seem to be using or at least looking at, he hopped in there and he took the opportunity to get some feedback on his API. Like, hey, why don't you like this API? What's hard about it? And have a back and forth with you. So that was awesome. In light of that, did you promote this discussion? Did you contact the folks? And how did everybody find out about it? Because a lot of us open up a discussion and, crickets. How did you get attention to this particular effort?
I think you know this story.
I don't. No, actually, you seem to be the famous one here to be able to get the attention. So
I mean, like, I know what I know, and I know I think it's May, a really awesome design system community builder. She has a newsletter, and I think she actually picked up on some of our open source work and was watching it. And I can't remember the company that May works at, but I really appreciate May for doing this. But she was going through a similar challenge at her company, so she was very interested in seeing research. And she ended up sharing that in her newsletter. And from that newsletter, other people saw it and started sharing it. I think some of the virality of that tweet or like engagement was also around like Shopify's replacing Sass. And I don't know if that's necessarily entirely true. Like, I think we are exploring alternatives to Sass in our design system, and we hope that these front end opinions that we have as a design system team would scale to the rest of the company. But there's no like we're removing Sass or Sass is terrible vibes here. Like we actually love Sass at Shopify, and we're still using Sass today in our major products. But we definitely have some concerns with the scale of Shopify and Sass that we can get into a bit later. But yeah, I think it was just May's newsletter, which was really awesome for that to like get that visibility. So really appreciated that. As an aside, I don't think we necessarily wanted that visibility just yet. Like we're still experimenting and exploring, and our opinions definitely could change over the coming months. But we appreciate it nonetheless because it's been a great learning opportunity. Just put it out there and work in the open, and really embrace that like culture. Like I think that's something we want to build on our team and scale. Is just this is how we work and this is how we solve problems. Even if it is a little bit uncomfortable, then someone can find it and put it in a newsletter and get more visibility. Like that's I think that's a problem we would like to have instead of not have.
If I could add on that, that's something I think a lot of people are maybe a little bit hesitant to do, is to broadcast work too early. I would certainly think we're at very early stages in this prototyping and experimentation and a lot of learnings going on. And so this kind of publicity really at least showed myself that getting the community involved and having this attention early on is really not too much of a bad thing. It's not a bad thing. Again, you could arrive into that too many cooks into the kitchen problem, too much early feedback, but certainly have been surprised with how that has not been as much of an issue I would have expected it to be. Yeah.
All right, let's go ahead and break right here. That's good for the first segment, so you can take a deep breath and get a drink of water or something. I will have some Spindrift. We're not
Excellent.
sponsored by Spindrift, but
Oh, nice. I have the raspberry lime one in my fridge.
that one's much better than this one. This is just
I
the whole
really like
lemon.
that one. That's just
Those
lemon.
are good.
This is kind of the most boring, but we get the variety pack, and someone's got to drink the lemon. Ends up being me.
I just got the one flavor. I mean, if you like one flavor, just get one flavor.
Smart decision. We go for the we buy in bulk at Costco, and I don't think they have single flavors. You have
Oh,
to
I
go for
see.
the,
Yeah.
Go for the gusto. We buy like 30 at a time.
Makes
So
sense. Yeah.
That's probably my biggest complaint about a lot of sparkling water is there'll be like the 3 flavor packs, and I'll like 2 of the flavors, but then there's that one flavor I'm just like, you're just throwing this in here just to get rid of it, just to sell it and make it profitable.
totally. The saving grace on the lemon Spindrift is it makes a good mixer if you're gonna have like a cocktail, because it's just basically kind of like lemon, sparkling.
Oh, fair, yeah.
So you throw a little bit of vodka in there, or add it to a margarita mix or something. Not too bad, but yeah, it's pretty boring otherwise. All right, does anybody need to step away? If not, we'll hop back in. I'm just happy I got to say the mighty penguin on the show, because
You're just waiting for that moment.
It is.
his I hovered on his avatar, and his description says, "You're not so usual penguin programmer." It's like, okay. Shout out to Victor. Nice work with the penguin references, Victor. All right. So now we'll talk in a little more detail about Sass, and maybe a little bit of the history of Sass inside the company. And I think you teed it up nicely at Alex at the end of that segment, in terms of what you all are thinking and doing there. So
I'm trying to like be a bit delicate because I could probably talk for an hour and just I just get into all the meat and potatoes. But yeah, definitely, I'm excited to jump into this.
Sweet. All right, I will open us up here. So Alex, I think you spoke some truth. Some of the interest in this particular discussion is this replacing Sass. Sass has been around for a very long time, and it's helped a lot of us be more productive for many years. I've never seen a replacing Sass discussion until I saw this one. So I was kind of like, whoa, replacing Sass. And then, of course, Shopify, y'all have a big application and business. And so people watch what you do and take note, because when you adopt things, maybe it's worth looking at. And when you ditch things, maybe it's worth ditching as well. So I think that was one of the reasons why this discussion did gain steam on the interwebs. Tell us about Sass, in more detail the history of it at the company. Like you said, you're not here to diss on it or hate on it or anything like that, but you are looking for alternatives. So maybe like some of the warts or some of the things that you hit up against where you decided it would be worth this effort to maybe replace with something else.
I'll kick off. Like, Sass has been a phenomenal technology at Shopify for us to scale, design decisions and opinions. And even before I joined Shopify, I worked with the Australian government building a design system there, and we did some, I would say, really advanced things with Sass. Like, we had functions that would find the closest accessible color. So if you had a white foreground color and a light pink background color, it would correct that white foreground color to be like a dark pink foreground color. So we had like really advanced functionality and like solutions to things in Sass, and I think Sass is an extremely powerful tool for solving design problems at scale. And I think lots of people, I would even encourage, should still use it today. But Sass at Shopify, like Sass has been at Shopify long before I joined. I think that I wouldn't be able to tell you the date that it existed, but it exists in our legacy, almost like Rails infrastructure, where we have like things that were built maybe even like in the first days of Shopify. We have Sass in our React infrastructure, where we just like either use the Sass files and compile them into CSS, or we already have the compiled CSS and use the classes from the Sass. We have so many applications for it. I think like currently in Polaris React, we have 152 Sass files. We have 2,000 plus Sass files in our biggest like monolithic repositories. And some of the things that we've really noticed as like a design system team is that we haven't really scaled, I would say, our design opinions in a way that is working with Sass right now. So some of the things that we've hit up against is we've created a tokens library. This tokens library is almost like a tech agnostic library that we could use in Figma, or we could use in HTML, or we could use in a mobile application that has like our color values. I think it has a few motion values and things like this, but it doesn't have everything. Like it should realistically have our spacing values. It should have a whole list of all of the things that sort of define Shopify's design. So where are these other values? Well, they're kind of spread between lots of different technologies. We have some of these JSON values in our tokens library get converted to CSS variables. Some of them get used as Sass variables in Sass mixins and functions. Some also just get imported into the React code and used that way, which is really bad. But we like lose a lot of control over the sort of how we want to scale those design opinions as we've scaled as a company. Like CSS variables came out, we're like, yeah, let's use CSS variables. But we never really cleaned up that Sass technical debt, and we never really put those variables all the way back into those tokens libraries. So that's a tension that we have. But I think the things that are more of a tension as a design systems team is that we ship Sass. And in shipping Sass to our users, they can use our functions, they can use our mixins, they can override our variables, and this becomes really scary. Mainly because if we want to go and make a change to something, we don't know what this could affect or this could impact at any time right now. So if we went and said that, I don't know, our primary button color is changing from green to purple, and they've got a function which takes that primary button color and maybe lightens it by 20%, and it does this for some very specific reason about this icon on this one page that they actually want to be a dark green, and then we go and replace it, like we get ourselves into a world of confusion and trouble trying to like update and scale these design decisions. So what we'd love, and what Sass doesn't really offer to us right now, is a way to like obfuscate or make it really difficult for those consumers to override those things unless they use sort of like our approved methods of overriding them. So that's sort of the direction that we're heading in. Is we would love to be able to trust trust these like teams and things to like use the tools in the ways that we encourage, but it's also really easy when those APIs exist, or when there's a little workaround that you can use that just like touches on that. Like, why wouldn't you do that? But then the implications of that become so much more when we need to go and change a function or a mixin or a way that we're solving a problem. But Sam, maybe there's some things you want to add. I don't know if I touched on everything.
No, I think you covered a lot of great points, and some that I'm really just wanted to touch on, like with how some of the next explorations we have done really do help solve a lot of those problems. But yeah, nothing to add on that topic.
So you identified these things. What I like is you very clearly stated your goals of what it is that you are looking for, what matters most for Polaris, and then like specific criteria. So when it comes time to go ahead and do the survey, you're not just kind of at the whims of what you feel like or what looks nice. You know, you have like you can create a matrix table and check the boxes and say, does it do this? Does it do that? Walk us through some of the things that are in that list of goals and why they're important for you.
Yeah, I mean, I might kick off, but like, just quickly, like, shout out to Martin Bjork. He's a developer on our team, creative technologist actually on our team. He sort of sits between design and development. And he actually said, like, he was looking at our research and he said, this is confusing. Can we do a matrix table of it? And then he even went and said, let's add user stories, which was awesome. And I think like Aveline and a few other people on our team, maybe Chloe, had an idea for like sort of prioritizing these. So it's definitely not it's very much a big team effort in like how we came to this table. Some of the things that we have on this table are like zero runtime. Like we love when things just work and don't impact our users. And Sass is a great example of that. Like when I use Sass, I take the burden as a developer of converting that Sass to CSS. My user gets CSS. They don't have to run anything in their browser to convert that Sass file to CSS. That's awesome. We love how like powerful that is, and that was something that we thought was really important. So in our zero runtime column, we have, as a user, I don't want any additional code or processing time spent for me to see styles. And, we went across these different technologies and we, looked at things like Sass and CSS, and we're like, yep, these are zero runtime. Like you compile the Sass to the CSS, the user gets the CSS file. If you just use CSS, the user just gets the CSS file. And it was a really great way to explore and understand these things. But like some of these things I would say are also our opinions. Like we have, I think we said that some things are not zero runtime, but maybe with some plugins or some different ways of approaching using those solutions, they could become zero runtime. But we really wanted to focus on what does the technology give us today without those things, because it's really easy to add 30 plugins or write custom code and solve problems for stuff. But as a company like Shopify, maintaining that and scaling that to other teams, that's when it becomes a lot harder or a lot trickier. So we have to be a little bit careful there. But Sam, were there any columns you wanted to talk about?
I would just say maybe when constructing like a matrix like this, something to be more objective about making this technology choice, just really considering those factors that apply to your company or your product, your team, design system, etc. Simply because, I mean, we did leverage a lot of other research on CSS library analysis, that very thorough work that other people have done, but just putting it into this matrix within our own context and our own, what we prioritized and needed in a solution, I think is really just something to keep in mind.
Divya, are you looking at this matrix? It's awesome.
Yeah, was the way that you evaluated just sort of coming up with like the criteria to some extent as a team, and then did each of you sort of pick a library to then do a spike on, and then sort of like from there come together as a team and then talk through the various features?
Okay, yeah. I would say, yeah, that was as well summarized. We definitely did truncate the list of libraries to explore pretty short. We did try to diversify across, some that were more runtime specific or CSS and JS style components-esque, others that were a little bit more utility based, like Tailwind. So we kind of tried to get more of a diverse set of libraries to examine. We did not like look at style components and emotion. We kind of bucketed those, into similar similar things. They both have their pros and cons, but that was kind of our strategy. But when we did do our analysis, we did put some time forth and kind of explore them, prototype with them, right? Not just kind of look at their feature list and check it off. We really wanted to get like hands-on experience and feeling what the library, how it was to work with, what was the developer experience like, would this fit into our tooling well, how easily would this be to adopt at scale, those kind of questions. Alex, do you have anything?
No, just like big plus one. I think the only thing I'd add is our team is growing and getting pretty large, and there are people that have worked with these other technologies in other companies or have experience using them as well, and that really helped us build some opinions quickly because some of these columns would be like, oh yeah, I've used this tool before. I know what this should do or shouldn't do. Or some of them was like, I don't know if Tailwind does this at all. Like, let's go spend like half a day exploring the ins and outs of this library and see if that would accomplish the needs that we have.
So
Let me
then
just paint.
I just noticed that like a lot of these criterias were just like various things that are really important, like zero runtime, like how to override styles and so on. Was a consideration also the migration strategy, because that is generally like the end goal is that, well, the end goal is that you have a new system, but the in between transition phase is always the awkward one. So how did you actually think through that part of things?
I think that's honestly something we're still figuring out. Like, we're doing a bit of an adoption plan right now to like say, if this is the app, how would teams consume this and use this with the Shopify tooling and technologies today? Um, we definitely care a lot about that adoption, and we're working closely with a few partner teams, and that's something that I'm really excited about. Like, we've partnered up with a few internal teams. We're going to start experimenting with how does it feel to use these things. Is it as you would expect? Are the APIs useful? Or are they hitting roadblocks? And what are those roadblocks? And are they roadblocks that we can get over, or are they like hard blockers? So we definitely are, I would say, early in that, like understanding the impact of that migration, but we're partnering up with a few teams internally at Shopify to really understand what they need from the system and how these changes could impact that. I would say that like the things that we're looking at right now have similar processes to the technologies that we were using in the past, like Sass and vanilla extract. Even though they're two separate worlds, they both have a file type that ends up being a CSS file. And that is really awesome because it means that that journey that our consumers or teams need to learn hopefully should be a lot more simpler, or which should be a lot more straightforward, with some guidance and documentation. Like, I think that's the other missing piece is we need a lot of documentation and like explanations around why these things were chosen, and that's some of the reason as well for open sourcing this research is it almost is a starting point for us to go and write guidance and documentation. Why did we choose this? How do we expect this to scale? How do we expect you to use this? What changes for me as a front-end developer at Shopify when I have to use this technology? I think that's all hopefully will come out.
So let me just draw a quick word picture around this matrix that the four of us are looking at, but our listeners definitely not looking at. By the way, we will link it up. It's in the chat, so if you're in the chat, click through on that. If you're not in the chat and you're listening to this in your podcast app, click on the show notes because you want to check out this matrix. In fact, if you steal one thing from this episode, I would just steal this matrix outright and use something similar for your own research. So imagine a list of features are the rows. So we mentioned open source along with a user story, which is a nice to have. As a consumer of a library, I want to contribute, request features, resolve issues, and debug in the code. And then the different solutions are each column. So you got Sass, CSS, Tailwind, CSS modules, stitches, vanilla extract with sprinkles, and emotion. And so for each of those features, you score each solution on a scale of 0. I'm assuming 0 means that it does not fit the bill. 1, which is yellow, so I guess it's like kind of good. And then 2 is green, which means yay, awesome. Maybe you guys can help us understand the color system and the numbering. And then, you go down the list and you add them all up and you see what the score is at the bottom. What I like about this, before you help us out with the scoring, is the features are not just listed out. They're actually broken out into categories. What's essential? what's important, and then what's nice to haves. I think that's a great practice for anybody trying to make a decision, is to prioritize what really matters, what you're optimizing for, and make your decisions based on that order versus just like a random list of things you want. But yeah, help us out. 0, 1, and 2. How are these quantified? Because it seems like they
I can
are.
talk a little bit to that. These are our opinions again on like, does it do what it says out of the box? And the emphasis there I think is like out of the box. Like if it does it, it gets a 2. If it does it, but it needs a lot of configuration, or it's a lot of technical debt to maintain, or it could be a pain for us to like maintain or consume, then it's a 1. So I think like a great example that I can think of is like autocomplete in Tailwind. Like for me to get autocomplete in Tailwind, I have to install a VS Code extension. So for me, having to then go and document that to our users, if we did use a solution like Tailwind, like, oh, you should use this plugin to like, that's an extra step every user of our design system would have to take to get that auto-completing functionality. So I would score that a 1 because out of the box you don't get that functionality, but it exists. And then a 0 is just, yeah, unfortunately this feature doesn't exist. And again, that's our understanding of it. We could be wrong, and I'd love to learn as well. If people are looking at this matrix and they disagree, like feel free to chuck a comment in there and tell us. We'd love to learn. So
Well, we can break here unless we have follow-up. We're going to dive into the solutions next, but should we break or should we continue? Divya, do you have anything else on this?
Are we gonna talk about the scoring quickly? Like, actually, we already did, right? That one.
Well, we'll
is like
talk about,
basic
you mean
and
the
then
aggregate
2.
scores?
The aggregate scores. The aggregate.
Yeah, let's talk
scores.
about that in the third segment. Okay, we'll call this.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely. We'll start there.
Okay, cool.
Cool. Because that's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, I was like, we
Yeah.
have to talk about that. We talked about how to score, but we didn't talk about what the end
scores
scores
were. Yeah, totally. Well, exactly. Yeah. We're teeing it up, you know. We want people to listen to the whole show. We haven't even said who the winner is yet, so.
suspense is building.
I should put that in the intro. If you want to know which library won, hang out to the third segment for the big reveal. Or just read the discussion, I guess. Another way of getting there faster.
It'll be like, surprise! It's not Mighty Penguin.
All right. Does
Or
anybody
maybe
need
it
to take a break?
Same.
I'm good.
Everybody having fun? Feeling good?
Oh yeah.
Feeling good, like I should. Got that Sunday's Best song in my head. I don't know if you guys know that one.
Oh, my partner plays that all the time, so I know
Yeah.
that one.
Well, it's your Thursday's Best, this in JS Partyland. All right.
But
What were you gonna say, Alex?
we're doing like 4-day work weeks recently over the summer, and I was just gonna say
Oh,
these
sick.
Thursdays are like Fridays for me. So this is our last one because the summer's ending, but it has been divine.
That's gotta be nice.
Awesome.
All right, let's hop back in. We will talk about the solutions, the scoring, the final winner, all the good stuff. I'm just having a hard time with my computering skills. I can't get my things open. Where'd it go? There it is. Okay. So we want to talk about what y'all found, because that's like it's pay dirt, right? At the end of the day, you put all the work in, you found a solution, or you picked one. We'll talk about how you got there. But before we get into that, and of course the aggregate scoring will come into play, so stay tuned for the way these different solutions scored. But how do you even find the options? Because discoverability is a thing. And I mean, people are talking about Tailwind. I had never heard of Stitches. I think I've heard of Vanilla Extract, but had never clicked through. I've heard of Emotion. But how do you all find solutions? Like how do you collect ones? And maybe you say, we're not going to check that one out. Is that like a thing that happens before you get to this stage? Is like, what are we actually going to try?
I could take that. I would say largely relying on others' experience, both within our team, but also there's a lot of, like I mentioned, other research, people who have already done comprehensive assessments or comparisons of these different libraries. There's, with CSS and JS, since it's, become a thing, there are like over 50 libraries. How do you make that choice? How do you find something that is as strong as Sass has become? But that comes back to that point of what seems to have a large community support, what seems to be well liked, well adopted. When you like Tailwind out of the gate screamed at us simply just because it's been highly adopted and well loved by a lot of other developers. So creating this list really was just, again, comparing what are our needs and then what solutions, top 10, top 20 can we parse from real quickly and just see, do any of these fit the bill? Do these seem to be scoped well for what we're trying to achieve?
We have to be a little bit harsh at the start as well, because there's infinite number of solutions right now for this. Like how should CSS get delivered to the browser? Like you could do it you could make something up even yourself if you wanted to. I'm sure someone's doing that right now. But we have to start with a bit of a baseline of like, if Shopify was to adopt this, like, would it disappear tomorrow? Like, if it's going to disappear tomorrow, we probably can't use this. Like, some bit more fleeting or unused. So, I think like tools that are widely used, like Tailwind, like that fills me with confidence, because I don't think that's going to disappear anytime soon. If anything, it will evolve and it will just keep growing with the huge community behind it. Vanilla Extract, however, is quite new, but it already is used in a few design systems, which we really love, which gave us more confidence. We could sort of explore and understand it, and it wasn't like a hugely technical project. Like if you dive into the code, like yes, there are technical and challenging areas, but the things that it was doing were a lot simpler than other things, mainly maybe because it is a newish project. Like they haven't built maybe all of the different layers, or maybe they have. I don't want to talk to their team, but it made it a lot more, I'd say, accessible and easier for us to like look into those sorts of solutions.
I'd also add, not looking at just the solution itself, but the characteristics of the solution was really helpful. So knowing that Tailwind was liked, is it because it's utility classes? Is it because it's atomic CSS? What characteristics are loved because of, like Chakra UI uses styled system and emotion. Why is it loved? What kind of those characteristics about these systems or about these technologies influences adoption? So that's kind of one thing that spoke to us as well, kind of help narrow down the choices.
So let's get quantitative, shall we? We have some totals here at the bottom of this matrix. The first one is Sass. Of course, you got to score Sass because that's the base case that you're comparing all these against. The score is a 37. So if you just take the list of 30 odd features that y'all listed and then the scores from 0 to 2 for each feature, Sass totals up at 37. Plain old CSS scores a 39, which I thought was pretty nice. Tailwind of 44. Take note of that one because there will not be any higher than that. CSS modules 21. Stitches 32. Vanilla Extract 38. And emotion 31. So what hops out to me right away, and maybe Divya, you caught on this as well, is Tailwind is the winner on the quantitative. But it's not what y'all decided on, is it?
And I think like there's a few things going on. One, we were just a little bit lazy and we totaled the whole table up. So that even includes like nice to have things, important things, maybe things that we don't care as much about. And I think it would have been interesting to like look at the scores from the essential and the important. So I mean, it's not going to change it too much. There's only 2 columns in there really. But I think that that would have also the numbers only mean so much. Like the numbers help us guide to like, we think like, maybe we should look at these 4 things, or maybe we should prototype with these 4 things, and that then helps us go and decide what we want to explore or dive a bit deeper in, and then we can from there make a better decision. And a decision that we ended up making was we want to explore using vanilla extract, and that's what we're doing right now. Is we're using this library to like explore and get a bit deeper. And I don't know, I think vanilla extract scored 3rd on our list, so it's definitely not even the top 2. But like if we look at the top 2, like Tailwind and CSS, CSS would have required us to either lose, and maybe lose isn't the wrong word, but it would have empowered teams to be a lot more flexible, but it would have made our job of maintaining and updating the design maybe a lot more challenging. Like if every team is writing their own CSS files, and instead of using our spacing CSS variable, they just hard-coded 9.25 pixels. Then we go in and change our spacing scale, which changes all of those variables. That would mean that we'd have to go back in and find all these hard-coded values. And as someone who's done that at a company like Shopify, not fun, like really not fun. It's really time-consuming. You're jumping up across multiple code bases and repositories. So it would be great to like have that in a scalable way. I still think CSS is awesome though. Like the ability to just trust people and like give them that empowerment to like make the design decisions that they need to. I also love that. But there's a balance, and we have to make a decision as a design system team, as a company, of like where does that balance sit. And Tailwind, like also another excellent solution, but there's just some like concerns that we have around like scaling Tailwind as a company at Shopify. Like we already have 20,000 Sass files. I think it was 20,000, 2,000. I can't remember off the top of my head. Let me double check. I'm probably 2,000. 20,000 sounded way too large. So we already have over 2,000 Sass files. And I think that like if we were to use a library like Tailwind, things like the just-in-time compilation would definitely want light and dark mode. We could have maybe 2,000 plus React files with those classes that it's auto-completing and adding to. It just feels like it's a risk right now to like invest in a product like that. Also, we don't know if Shopify wants to have more than just light and dark mode, and Tailwind right now has really strong support for light and dark mode, but as soon as you add a new color variant, like maybe you wanted a dim or a extra dark mode, that would then have to go and generate all the color CSS classes again. And that means that there's more just-in-time compilation and there's more CSS classes getting added to HTML. And it's not that we think that's necessarily a bad thing, but like how we scale that and make sure that that doesn't turn into a big mess at Shopify is something we're concerned about. So CSS variables, that approach feels a lot more powerful, and if we can have classes that we can override with CSS variables, that empowers us to like move a lot quicker. But Sam, is there anything you wanted to add about the sort of like total score?
Yeah, I would just say like this was only one way of kind of parsing through our observations and the attributes that we're interested in. If we wanted to go be, I guess, a little less lazy and put weights to the different importance, like kind of like have weights and, what is a non-negotiable, what's something that's a nice to have, make these scores a little bit more refined, we could certainly do that. This was really more of just a scrappy way for us to kind of take the mental model of saying, what do these libraries have as a larger picture, kind of zooming out and putting them side by side. And really just being more data informed, giving some kind of objective criteria. It could be more accurate, right? But I think we kind of understood our requirements, and by prototyping with them, hands-on, that was a lot more informative for us. But this was certainly a more objective way of looking at it. So yeah, again, I think these scores could certainly be refined, but it definitely helps serve our purpose of assessing these solutions.
Yeah, I was going to suggest that for an iteration on this, if you're going to steal it, and I would say at least weight the 3 categories so that the more important things get more scores, and you probably would have a better reflection of the final decision. For example, in the discussion, you made it sound like TypeScript support was pretty important. It's in the important features section, but it just seems like in this representation doesn't seem like as much. Maybe I read in too far, but it seems like that was a pretty important thing. And a couple, I mean, this is kind of an all or nothing thing. Like, do you have it or not? And I think probably it might not be representative of how much it meant to y'all. Is that fair?
Script support one's very interesting, I actually think, to pull out because I think like vanilla extract does something very special with TypeScript support that is different to the other libraries. Like um, when I think of TypeScript support for CSS, that just sounds weird. And that's like the special place to me where vanilla extract lives is as I create a grid component and I give it a gap value, I'm auto-completing instantly from a list of spacing tokens that come straight from our library of atomic styles. And that's through TypeScript. And that is so powerful because I haven't had to add an extra feature. I haven't had to do anything to Visual Studio Code. I've literally just opened up this TypeScript project and it knows through the linked types that like this is auto-completing from these values. When I think about TypeScript and CSS, like it's less so TypeScript and CSS. It's more like how can we get autocomplete into CSS, or like how can we autocomplete from CSS our specific CSS variables that we've approved. And our team in the past, shout out to Andrew Musgrave, he wrote a full CSS variable linter where he would go and pass our code to like check if there were people using incorrect CSS variables or if there were typos. And we don't want to like that's extra technical debt that we have to maintain. And it was an awesome solution at the time, but if this was just built into how we did styles, that would mean that we could sort of just ignore that completely, which is such a powerful thing. So I think that's a huge exciting feature for me around like vanilla extract is I feel like this combination of TypeScript and CSS is something that I haven't seen before. And just as an aside, like I'm terrified of TypeScript. I'm terrible at TypeScript. If you give me some crazy like override or something like this, like I will be the first person to trip and stumble. But what I'm talking about here is a lot more like properties auto-completing with values that come from your tokens or come from your CSS variables. And that setup and that time that we invested as a team to get that set up is so worth it. And it just feels, as a person using that system now, it feels really great to like just easily see those values pop up and move quickly. But Sam, you know much more about TypeScript than I do, so I don't know, maybe you want to add something to.
I would just maybe add that it's not just, giving values, really just hammering on the design system values, right? Like really making it easy to and apparent like what values are part of the system. A lot of these solutions have theming support, but I think what's really nice about something like vanilla extract is it truly has like type support for both the design system values as well as like the atomic classes. Because we mentioned vanilla extract with sprinkles. That was kind of the nice thing about it is it kind of brought that tailwind factor into it. We mentioned you could have like these IntelliSense third-party add-ons for TypeScript to autocomplete certain utility classes, right? Well, we have autocomplete with theming support in a lot of TypeScript solutions, CSS and JS solutions, but this really kind of combines those two worlds and it brings it to a technology that's already within our Shopify ecosystem. Like we've all adopted TypeScript. We don't have to add anything new. There's no extra server running to check or lint. So it's kind of just meets us where we are in a way.
Vanilla extract team has to be happy. This is like they're on The Bachelor and they got the rose. You know? You fell in love. And
Did the conversation with them have any impact on the decision at all?
good question.
No, like we had never talked to their team until after they saw that we were using their product.
No way.
And we would have loved to have talked to them beforehand, but we don't, like, just as an aside, like we don't really want to bias our opinions like based on talking to this team or another team. And like I've talked to a few people that work at Tailwind, like Simon, who does all their videos. I'm a big fan of his work, and I've hanged out with him a few times in person. Doesn't mean that I'm going to use his product, unfortunately, Simon. But like the reason we use that is because we actually explored it and wanted to, and then those connections opened up from that and sharing that research, which was really great. And in terms of them getting the rose, maybe like I think that like want to invest in open source. We want to like collaborate with these like library maintainers to like help them get one like some attention. Like I definitely think the vanilla extract team deserves the attention. Like they're a team of 3 doing excellent things at like Seek in Australia to build like a design system and a whole bunch of tooling around it. And if we can put a spotlight on the awesome work that they're doing and get other people to think about using it, that not only benefits us, it benefits them, it benefits that community around that tool and that platform. So yeah, I mean maybe they get the rose, but I mean I never saw it as that. Like it was more like we needed a solution, and that seemed like a great solution. And if there's an outcome of that where they feel, I don't know, great that we chose that, I mean that's awesome. But like
Yeah.
it wasn't necessarily our intention.
Well, I think they definitely deserve the attention, and it's awesome that they're getting it now. Maybe Divya, maybe we should bring them on JS Party and give Vanilla
Yeah, I was
Extract
just
this.
thinking that like almost an extension of this episode, like a part
Yeah.
2, where we're like, hey, we need to talk to them just to get a sense of, because it is a newer library, and I think the usage is not super high at this point, but we could definitely bring visibility to it.
Stay tuned for that. Let us know, listener, if you are interested in that. And I forgot, Sam, your last name is Rose, so this was like the perfect analogy.
It is. I usually make those puns, but I saw it in my head. I just didn't say anything. It's like,
Well, you had better taste than I did. I have no
I'm
shame.
just shocked that you used The Bachelor as a metaphor.
Well, it's a cultural staple at this point. I mean, how long has that show been on? Probably like
I have no
20
idea.
years.
But that's not the
Yeah.
metaphor I would have reached for personally, I guess. But I'm just
Fair
tickled
enough.
that that's the one you used.
I liked it. I thought it was applicable.
No,
I was
it
gonna
was
go with
great. It was
Survivor,
great.
but figured.
You got booted off the island.
Yeah, exactly. Kind of the other way around. So, guys, what's next? We're getting towards the end of the show, but what happens next for y'all? I mean, is it's still kind of an experimentation phase? Are you starting to integrate vanilla extract into Polaris? Do you replace it one file at a time, or what's the plan?
I'll kick off. Like, we're like exploring right now. So I think the first step is like get this to a state where we can get other teams using it, and then start getting feedback. So our biggest goal right now is like get this into the hands of internal teams so that we can figure out what's working, what's not working, and make this the product that's going to, accelerate Shopify into the future. I think that we have a lot of work to do to like make sure that this is the right solution. Like we have roll-up tools right now that use vanilla extract, and for us to use vanilla extract roll-up, we have to have some kind of opinion on how we want to bundle those CSS files together. But maybe Sam, you can take over because you know a lot more about sort of like the next steps from the technical side that we're going to be exploring.
Yeah, you mentioned like migration strategies and adoption plans. That's kind of what we're really focused on now. Like now that we've seen the technology, we understand that this could be very right for Shopify, and we think it can scale. We think it's really good for what we're calling like a foundational base to build upon. But again, making it easy to make those design system choices and kind of adhere and flex the system, make it flexible for the factors of whatever the products that we're delivering at Shopify. That adoption and rollout plan is kind of what we're working on now. So we kind of better understand the technology, and now we're working with other teams within Shopify to integrate it into our common build systems, and making sure that it's seamless and easy for vanilla extract to be used and understood across Shopify. Some of those reasons, like we mentioned, it is very similar to Sass, and that's like a .css, .ts file, and that gets extracted into a .css file. But it's used similar like CS modules, which we're already using today. So that adoption, we do hope, is going to be very smooth. But really just figuring out a lot of those technical details and getting the build integrations kind of figured out.
Awesome. Well, we're happy that y'all did this research in the open, in the public, and allowed our prying eyes to check it out and learn alongside you, see how you made your decisions, what was important to you there, what you looked at, how you ranked it, so that we can go out and make our own decisions, a little more informed than we would have otherwise. So pretty cool, guys. Sam and Alex, thanks for coming on JS Party and talking us through this entire thing. Of course, all of the links to all the things are in your show notes, especially that matrix is in there, the discussion thread, and a link to each of the 6 solutions. I guess 5, because can you link to CSS? We could find a way. We'll link to it somehow. Probably the MDN article will be in your show notes, so you can check out all the different options that they checked out for yourself. Any final words, guys, before we call it a show?
Huge thank you. Thanks for like letting us come here and talk. And I'd love to see like the Vanilla Extract team on here and like sharing their technology. I think they'll do a much better job than we did of like pitching or explaining the different ins and outs of it.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, thank you so much. And it was great to be on here talking about open research and open source and design systems. So thank you so much.
Yeah, just +1. It's been a party. Thank you.
You bet. Well, we definitely are interested in doing that episode, so let's make it happen. Stay tuned for that. Divya, thanks for being my co-pilot today. Happy to have you back.
It's a good show.
Good show. All right, that's JS Party for this week. We will talk to you. Might need to rename this episode Shopify's Bachelor Experience. All right, now the show's officially over. We're still on YouTube, but you can take a deep breath.
It's like
That was great, guys.
They do like the Bachelor in Paradise. It's like Bachelor in JS Party.
Yeah.
I only know that because I've seen ads for it. I don't watch Bachelor, I promise.
I haven't watched it.
I need
since it was,
to.
like,
I don't want to
season
ruin
1.
my cred.
Right? I feel like I ruined
Let it
mine
be
a little
known
bit
that I
there.
don't watch garbage.
Well, that's right. I don't have any cred, so it doesn't really matter.
Oh, that's hilarious.
Can't reduce from 0. You're just right there.
I know. A friend did drag me into it a bit because it was a way for us to hang out. So he was like, "Let's watch The Bachelor," and I was just like, "I really don't want to, but for you, I will."
There's a show on Netflix which I haven't clicked on, but it's always showing me the thing as you scroll past, and it's like The Bachelor, but rated NC-17. It's not quite like porn, but it's like Lust Island or something. Have you guys seen that on
gosh,
Netflix?
the ads
It's
are
like it's
horrible.
ridiculous. Yeah.
It's horrible. Honestly, they're just using the same trope and like just there's a lot of like the dating show format is really popular because people I guess like watching trash, especially during the pandemic. So it's just
Reality TV is huge. I've been watching Ted Lasso, and there's a character in it who's like this big burly man, and he like goes to grandma's. But I think in reality he's just watching a reality TV show with them and having rosé. It's so hilarious.
Yeah, Ted Lasso's great.
it's pretty good.
Big fan.
Although it does make you feel good about yourself when you do watch it sometimes. Like sometimes I do trash watch stuff just if I
Just
need
for
to
a confidence
pick up.
booster.
Yeah, like I at least make I make good
There's worse
decisions
people
in my
than me out
life.
there. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. That's a good reason to watch
Feel
that
that vibe.
Hoarders. Have you ever watched the Hoarders show on Discovery?
No, I have not.
Where they basically just pack their houses with stuff. They just can't throw anything away. And I mean,
That
it's
would
like you
give
can't
me-
even walk in this garage because they've hoarded so much stuff. That always makes me feel better. As a person who wants to be minimalist but then ends up failing at it, it has more
It's
stuff
hard
than
to
I
be
want.
a minimalist if you like, especially during a pandemic. I actually don't think it's possible to be a minimalist unless you're
Yes.
okay being unhappy most of the time.
You're okay.
Because like
Just watch reality shows. All
yeah,
you need is
because
a
if
Netflix
you're
subscription.
a minimalist, you can't have things, and so like in a pandemic, you're not going out because minimalists generally aren't home; they're out doing things, like
Right.
out being outdoors or like hanging out with friends or whatever. But if you're home all the time and you're a minimalist, that means you just basically have nothing. You're just surrounded by space and yourself.
Yeah. Well,
true.
collecting things is back. So collectibles are, I mean, not just NFTs, but actual physical collectibles like baseball trading cards, not Pokemon, Pogs, like anything that was collectible is back. and it's big business right now because people are just buying stuff because they're not
Really
going
hope
anywhere.
they, really hope they do that again. I loved getting like my packet of crisps or chips and getting my little collectible. That was so much
Oh,
fun.
yeah.
Ah, yes.
I like it because I collected a lot of baseball cards as a kid, and then they all were worth nothing, and now they're worth something again. But I'm like, I'm not gonna sell them, so I guess it doesn't really matter. But I like to feel like they're worth something. All right, so you guys can stop your local recordings. We'll say goodbye to everybody listening live. Stay tuned for next week. Should be a good one. We're talking
Thanks,
X
everyone.
State. And then, of course, the front end feud returns here shortly.
Oh, I'm so excited.
That's going to be
Really
fun.
fun.
Yeah, we're playing front end feud with it's Syntax versus Shop Talk. So we're doing a podcast super collab
Yes.
with all three of our podcasts.
Love it.
And that should be a good one. So that's coming up soon as well. All right, goodbye, live listeners. Thanks for hanging out. See you next